The Dutch Revolt was the successful revolt of the northern, largely Protestant 7 provinces of the Low Countries against the rule of the Roman Catholic King Philip II of Spain, who had inherited the region from the defunct Duchy of Burgundy. The religious clash of cultures built up gradually but inexorably into outbursts of violence against the perceived repression of the Habsburg crown. These tensions led to the formation of the independent Dutch Republic. The first leader was William of Orange, followed by several of his descendants and relations. This revolt was one of the first successful secessions in Europe, and led to one of the first European republics of the modern era, the United Provinces. King Philip was initially successful in suppressing the rebellion. In 1572, however, the rebels captured Brielle and the rebellion resurged. The northern provinces became independent, first in 1581 de facto, and in 1648 de jure. During the revolt, the United Provinces of the Netherlands, better known as the Dutch Republic, rapidly grew to become a world power through its merchant shipping and experienced a period of economic, scientific, and cultural growth. The southern Netherlands remained under Spanish rule. The continuous heavy-handed rule by the Habsburgs in the south caused many of its financial, intellectual, and cultural elite to flee north, contributing to the success of the Dutch Republic. The Dutch imposed a rigid blockade on the southern provinces which prevented Baltic grain relieving famine in the southern towns, especially from 1587 to 1589. By the end of the war in 1648, large areas of the southern Netherlands had been lost to France, which had, under the guidance of Cardinal Richelieu and Louis XIII of France, allied itself with the Dutch Republic in the 1630s against Spain. The first phase of the conflict can be considered to be the Dutch War of Independence. The focus of the latter phase was to gain official recognition of the already de facto independence of the United Provinces. This phase coincided with the rise of the Dutch Republic as a major power and the founding of the Dutch Empire. Background: in a series of marriages and conquests, a succession of Dukes of Burgundy expanded their original territory by adding to it a series of fiefdoms, including the 17 provinces. Although Burgundy itself had been lost to France in 1477, the Burgundian Netherlands were still intact when Charles V was born in Ghent in 1500. He was raised in the Netherlands and spoke fluent Dutch, French, Spanish, and some German. In 1506 he became Lord of the Burgundian states, among which were the Netherlands. Subsequently, in 1516, he inherited several titles, including the combined kingdoms of Aragon and Castile and Leon, which had become a worldwide empire with the Spanish colonization of the Americas. In 1519 he became ruler of the Habsburg Empire, and he gained the title Holy Roman Emperor in 1530. Although Friesland and Gelders offered prolonged resistance, virtually all of the Netherlands had been incorporated into the Habsburg domains by the early 1540s. Taxation: Flanders had long been a very wealthy region, and had been coveted by the French kings for a long time. The other Netherlands had also grown into wealthy and entrepreneurial regions within the empire. Charles V's empire became a worldwide empire with large American and European territories. The latter were, however, distributed throughout Europe. Control and defense of these were hampered by the disparateness of the territories and huge length of the empire's borders. This large realm was almost continuously at war with its neighbors in its European heartlands, most notably against France in the Italian Wars and against the Turks in the Mediterranean Sea. Further wars were fought against Protestant princes in Germany. The Netherlands paid heavy taxes to fund these wars, but perceived them as unnecessary and sometimes downright harmful, because they were directed against their most important trading partners. Protestantism: during the 16th century, Protestantism rapidly gained ground in Northern Europe. Dutch Protestants, after initial repression, were tolerated by local authorities. By the 1560s, the Protestant community had become a significant influence in the Netherlands, although it clearly formed a minority then. In a society dependent on trade, freedom and tolerance were considered essential. Nevertheless, Charles V, and later Philip II, felt it was their duty to defeat Protestantism, which was considered a heresy by the Catholic Church and a threat to the stability of the whole hierarchical political system. On the other hand, the intensely moralistic Dutch Protestants insisted their biblical theology, sincere piety and humble lifestyle was morally superior to the luxurious habits and superficial religiosity of the ecclesiastical nobility. The harsh measures led to increasing grievances in the Netherlands, where the local governments had embarked on a course of peaceful coexistence. In the second half of the century, the situation escalated. Philip sent troops to crush the rebellion and make the Netherlands once more a Catholic region. Although failing in his attempts to introduce the Spanish Inquisition directly, the Inquisition of the Netherlands was nevertheless sufficiently harsh and arbitrary in nature to provoke fervent dislike. Centralization, part of the shifting balance of power in the late Middle Ages, meant that, besides the local nobility, many of the Dutch administrators by now were not traditional aristocrats, but instead stemmed from non-noble families that had risen in status over previous centuries. By the 15th century, Brussels had thus become the de facto capital of the 17 provinces. Dating back to the Middle Ages, the districts of the Netherlands, represented by its nobility and the wealthy city-dwelling merchants, still had a large measure of autonomy in appointing its administrators. Charles V and Philip II set out to improve the management of the empire by increasing the authority of the central government in matters like law and taxes, a policy which caused suspicion both among the nobility and the merchant class. An example of this is the takeover of power in the city of Utrecht in 1528, when Charles V supplanted the Council of Guildmasters governing the city by his own stadtholder, who took over worldly powers in the whole province of Utrecht from the Archbishop of Utrecht. Charles ordered the construction of the heavily fortified castle of Wredenburg for defense against the Duchy of Gelre and to control the citizens of Utrecht. Under the governorship of Mary of Hungary, traditional power had for a large part been taken away both from the stadtholders of the provinces and from the high noblemen, who had been replaced by professional jurists in the Council of State. Initial stages. Prelude to the rebellion in 1556, Charles passed on his throne to his son Philip II of Spain. Charles, despite his harsh actions, had been seen as a ruler empathetic to the needs of the Netherlands. Philip, on the other hand, was raised in Spain and spoke neither Dutch nor French. During Philip's reign, tensions flared in the Netherlands over heavy taxation, suppression of Protestantism, and centralization efforts. The growing conflict would reach a boiling point and lead ultimately to the War of Independence. Nobility in opposition in an effort to build a stable and trustworthy government of the Netherlands. Philip appointed his half-sister Margaret of Parma as governor of the Netherlands. He continued the policy of his father of appointing members of the high nobility of the Netherlands to the Raad van State, the governing body of the 17 Netherlands, that advised her. He made his confidant Antoine Perrenot de Granville head of that council. However, already in 1558 the states of the provinces and the States General of the Netherlands started to contradict Philip's wishes, by objecting to his tax proposals and by demanding, with eventual success, the withdrawal of Spanish troops which had been left by Philip to guard the southern Netherlands borders with France, but which they saw as a threat to their own independence. Subsequent reforms met with much opposition, which was mainly directed at Granville. Petitions to King Philip by the high nobility went unanswered. Some of the most influential nobles, including Lamoral, Count of Egmont, Philip de Montmorency, Count of Horn, and William the Silent, withdrew from the Council of State until Philip recalled Granville. In late 1564, the nobles had noticed the growing power of the Reformation and urged Philip to come up with realistic measures to prevent violence. Philip answered that sterner measures were the only answer. Subsequently, Egmont, Hon and Orange withdrew once more from the council, and Bergen and Meghem resigned their stadtholdership. During the same period, the religious protests were increasing in spite of increased oppression. In 1566, a league of about 400 members of the nobility presented a petition to the governor Margaret of Parma to suspend persecution until the rest had returned. One of Margaret's courtiers, Count Berlaymont, called the presentation of this petition an act of beggars, a name then taken up by the petitioners themselves. The petition was sent on to Philip for a final verdict. 1566, Iconoclasm and Repression. The atmosphere in the Netherlands was tense due to the rebellion, preaching of Calvinist leaders, hunger after the bad harvest of 1565, and economic difficulties due to the Northern 7 Years' War. Early August 1566, a monastery church at Steenvoorde in Flanders was sacked by a mob led by the preacher Sebastian Maat. This incident was followed by similar riots elsewhere in Flanders, and before long the Netherlands had become the scene of the Beeldenstorm, a riotous iconoclastic movement by Calvinists, who stormed churches and other religious buildings to desecrate and destroy church art and all kinds of decorative fittings over most of the country. The number of actual image breakers appears to have been relatively small and the exact backgrounds of the movement are debated, but in general, local authorities did not step in to rein in the vandalism. The actions of the iconoclasts drove the nobility into two camps, with Orange and other grandees opposing the movement and others, notably Henry of Brederode, supporting it. Even before he answered the petition by the nobles, Philip had lost control in the troublesome Netherlands. He saw no other option than to send an army to suppress the rebellion. On the 22nd of August 1567, Fernando Álvarez de Toledo, 3rd Duke of Alba, marched into Brussels at the head of 10,000 troops. Alba took harsh measures and rapidly established a special court to judge anyone who opposed the king. Alba considered himself the direct representative of Philip in the Netherlands and frequently bypassed Margaret of Parma and made use of her to lure back some of the fugitive nobles, notably the Counts of Egmont and Hoorn, causing her to resign office in September 1567. Egmont and Hoorn were arrested for high treason, condemned, and a year later decapitated on the Grand Place in Brussels. Egmont and Hoorn had been Catholic nobles, loyal to the King of Spain until their deaths. The reason for their execution was that Alba considered they had been treasonous to the king in their tolerance to Protestantism. Their executions, ordered by a Spanish noble, provoked outrage. More than 1,000 people were executed in the following months. The large number of executions led the court to be nicknamed the Blood Court in the Netherlands, and Alba to be called the Iron Duke. Rather than pacifying the Netherlands, these measures helped to fuel the unrest. William of Orange. William I of Orange was stadtholder of the provinces Holland, Zeeland and Utrecht, and Burgrave of Antwerp, and the most influential noble in the States General who had signed the petition. After the arrival of Alva, to avoid arrest, as had happened to Egmont and Hoorn, he fled to the lands ruled by his wife's father, the Count Elector of Saxony. All his lands and titles in the Netherlands were forfeited to the Spanish king. In 1568, William returned to try to drive the highly unpopular Duke of Alva from Brussels. William's nominal purpose was to remove misguided ministers like Alba, end rebellion, and thus restore the proper authority of King Philip. This view is reflected in today's Dutch national anthem, the Wilhelmus, in which the last lines of the first stanza read, Den Koning van Hispange heb ik altijd geëerd. In pamphlets and in his letters to allies in the Netherlands, William also called attention to the right of subjects to renounce their oaths of obedience if the sovereign would not respect their privileges. William's forces moved into the Netherlands from 4 different directions. Armies led by his brothers invaded from Germany while French Huguenots invaded from the south. Although the Battle of Rheindalen near Roermond had occurred on 23 April 1568 and had been won by the Spanish, the Battle of Hillegaard, fought on 23 May 1568, is commonly regarded as the beginning of the 80 Years' War, and it was a victory for the rebel army. But the campaign ended in failure as William ran out of money and his own army disintegrated, while those of his allies were destroyed by the Duke of Alva. William remained at large and, as the only grandee still able to offer resistance, was from then on seen as the leader of the rebellion. When the revolt broke out once more in 1572, he moved his court back to the Netherlands, to Delft in Holland, as the ancestral lands of Orange and Breda remained occupied by the Spanish. Delft remained William's base of operations until his assassination by Balthasar Gerard in 1584.